reading you to sleep, or at least I hope you fall asleep. Unless you think the book is interesting, then 100% understandable. So I'm gonna read A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I'm almost done with the book, but we're just gonna read like the first 2-3 chapters, however long they are. Maybe do like a 15-minute video, like 15 minutes or something like that. I also thought maybe we can include like some like pen nibbling and like tracing. So let's get started. So today we're gonna be reading a court of thorns and roses. A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I'm assuming it's Maas or Maas. Okay. Oh, that's so cool. I didn't even know. There's a little map of like the town, or I guess you could say town, the fairy realms. It's a cute little book. I don't know how to describe it. I feel like the best way I could describe it is like Beauty and the Beast for adults. Where'd my pen go? So, chapter 1. The forest had become a labyrinth of snow and ice. I'd been monitoring the parameters of the thicket for an hour, and my vantage point in the crook of a tree branch had turned useless. The gusting wind blew thick flurries to sweep away my tracks, but buried along with them any signs of potential quarry. Hunger had brought me farther from home than I usually risked, but winter was the hard time. The animals had pulled in, going deeper into the woods than I can follow, leaving me to pick off stragglers one by one, praying they'd last until spring. They hadn't. I wiped my numb fingers over my eyes, brushing away the flakes clinging to my lashes. Here, there were no telltale trees stripped of bark to mark the deer's passing. They hadn't yet moved on. They would remain until the bark ran out. They traveled north past the wolf's territory and perhaps into the fairylands of Brythian, where no mortals would dare go, not unless they had a death wish. A shudder skittered down my spine at the thought, and I shoved it away, focusing on my surroundings, on the task ahead. That was all I could do, all I'd been able to do for years. Focusing on surviving the week, the day, the hour ahead. And now with the snow, I'd be lucky to spot anything, especially from my position up in the tree, invisibility, unnecessary noise. I was well on my way to yet another fruitless hunt. Only a few hours of daylight remained. If I didn't leave soon, I'd have to navigate my way home in the dark. And the warnings of the town hunters still rang fresh in my mind. Giant wolves were on the prowl, and in numbers, not to mention whispers of strange folk spotted in the area, tall and eerie and deadly. Deadly, 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 deadly. Wait, no, we already read that chapter. Oops. Anything but fairies. The hunters had besieged our long forgotten gods, and I had secretly prayed alongside them. In the 8 years we'd been living in our village, 2 days' journey from the immortal border of Brithian, we'd been spared an attack, though traveling peddlers sometimes brought stories of distant border towns left in splinters and bones and ashes. These accounts, once rare enough to be dismissed by the village elders as hearsay, had in recent months become commonplace whisperings on every market day. On every market day, every market day, every market day. I had risked much in coming so far into the forest, but we'd finished our last loaf of bread yesterday and the remainder of our dried meat the day before. Still, I would rather have spent another night with a hungry belly than found myself satisfying the appetite of a wolf or a fairy. Not that there was much of me to feast on. I turned gangly by this time of year and could count a good number of my ribs. Moving as nimbly and quietly as I could between the trees, I pushed a hand against my hollow and aching stomach. I knew the expression that would be on my 2 elder sisters' faces when I returned to our cottage empty-handed yet again. After a few minutes of careful searching, I crouched in a cluster of snow-heavy brambles. Through the thorns I had a half-decent view of a clearing and the small brook following through it. A few holes in the ice suggested it was still frequently used. Hopefully something would come by. Hopefully. I sighed through my nose, digging the tip of my bow into the ground, and leaned my forehead against the crude curve of the wood. The crude curve of the wood. We wouldn't last another week without food, and too many families had already started begging for me to hope for handouts from the wealthier townsfolk. I'd witnessed firsthand exactly how far their charity went. I eased into a more comfortable position and calmed my breathing, straining to listen to the forest over the wind. The snow fell and fell, dancing and curling like sparkling spindrifts, the white fresh and clean against the brown and gray of the world. sometimes I quieted that relentless, vicious part of my mind to take in the snow-veiled woods. Once it had been second nature to savor the contrast. Should I unplug my fridge? That's loud. BRB. Okay, excuse me. Where were we? Once it had been second nature to savor the contrast of new grass against dark, tilled soil, or an amethyst brooch nestled in folds of emerald silk. Once I dreamed and breathed and thought in color and light and shape. Sometimes I would even indulge in envisioning a day when my sisters were married and it was only me and my father, with enough food to go around, enough money to buy some paint, and enough time to put those colors and shapes down on paper or canvas or the cottage walls. Not likely to happen anytime soon, perhaps ever. So I was left with moments like this, admiring the glint of pale winter light on snow. I couldn't remember the last time I'd done it, bothered to notice anything lovely or interesting. Stolen hours in a decrepit barn with Isaac Hale didn't count. Those times were hungry and empty and sometimes cruel, but never lovely. The howling wind calmed into a soft sighing. The snow fell lazily now, in big, fat clumps that gathered along every nook and bump of the trees. Mesmerizing, the lethal, gentle beauty of the snow. I'd soon have to return to the muddy, frozen woods of the village, to the cramped heat of our cottage. Some small, fragmented parts of me recoiled at the thought. Bushes rustled across the clearing. Drawing my bow was a matter of instinct. I peered through the thorns, and my breath caught. Less than 30 paces away stood a small doe, not yet too scrawny from winter, but desperate enough to wrench bark from a tree in the clearing. A deer like that could feed my family for a week or more. My mouth watered. this was its sheer rarity. I'd seen drawings of the trees, but never one with my own eyes. Not after the high fae had burned them all long ago. So few remained, most of them small and sickly and hidden by the nobility within high-walled groves. I'd spent weeks after my purchase debating whether that overpriced bit of wood had been a waste of money or a fake, and for 3 years the ash arrow had sat unused in my quiver. Now I drew it, keeping my movements minimal, efficient, anything to avoid that monstrous wolf looking in my direction. The arrow was long and heavy enough to inflict damage and possibly kill him if I aimed right. My chest became so tight it ached, and in that moment I realized my life boiled down to one question: was the wolf alone? I gripped my bow and drew my string further back. I was a decent shot, but I'd never faced a wolf. I thought it made me lucky, even blessed, but now I didn't know where to hit or how fast they moved. I couldn't afford to miss, not when I only had one ash arrow. If it was indeed a fairy's heart pounding under that fur, then good riddance. Good riddance after all their kind had done to us. I wouldn't risk this one later creeping into our village to slaughter and maim and torment. I let him die, here and now. I'd be glad to end him. The wolf crept closer and a twig snapped beneath one of his paws, each bigger than my hand. The doe went rigid. She glanced to either side, ears straining toward the gray sky. With the wolf's downwind position, she couldn't see or smell him. His head lowered and his massive silver body so perfectly blended into the snow and shadows, sank onto its haunches. The doe was still, staring in the wrong direction. I glanced from the doe to the wolf and back again. At least he was alone. At least I'd been spared that much. But if the wolf scared the doe off, I was left with nothing but a starving, oversized wolf, possibly a fairy, looking for the next best meal. And if he killed her, destroying precious amounts of hide and fat. If I judged wrongly, my life wasn't the only one that would be lost, but my life had been reduced to nothing but risk these past 8 years that I'd been hunting in the woods, and I'd picked correctly most of the time. Most of the time. The wolf shot from the brush in a flash of gray and white and black, his yellow fangs gleaming. He was even more gargantuan. I'm assuming she means the wolf is very, he's bigger in the open. A marvel of muscle and speed and brute strength. The doe didn't stand a chance. I fired the ash arrow before he destroyed much else of her. The arrow found its mark in his side, and I could have sworn the ground itself shuddered. He barked in pain, releasing the doe's neck as his blood sprayed on the snow was so ruby bright. He whirled toward me, those yellow eyes wide and hackles raised. His low growl reverberated in the empty pit of my stomach as I surged to my feet. Snow churning around me, another arrow drawn. wasn't sure